Iran's Revolutionary Guards are devastated on their own streets, and Tehran's avenues have surrendered to a massive spiral of chaos. Just days ago, Iran's Immortal Guards launched a ruthless and systematic guerrilla war against the regime's military apparatus. On May 1st, a massive explosion occurred in the Zanjan region in the country's northwest. The toll was of the kind that would touch the regime's raw nerve endings and make the supreme leader and all regime elites feel the fear of death from within. According to Iran International, 14 elite soldiers belonging to the Revolutionary Guards VIP Protection Unit, Ansar al-Mahdi, including Senior Commander Ali Musavi Havai, were blown to pieces within seconds. If you look at the official statements and claims served by Iran's state media Press TV, the incident was nothing more than a tragic accident during a routine unexploded ordnance clearance operation conducted across a 1,200-hectare contaminated area. However, when we examine the picture in the light of military doctrines and explosive disposal protocols, the state media's explanations contain contradictions that stretch the limits of logic considerably. In a munitions clearance operation, the clustering of elite personnel attached to the regime's highest-level protection and special operations units, such as Ansar al-Mahdi, at a single point in such density, does not align well with military logic. According to Times of Israel and open-source intelligence reports from diaspora sources, the fact that 14 elite soldiers, including a critical name like Commander Ali Musavi Havai, clustered at the same point at the same time and lost their lives, points to planning far deeper than an ordinary workplace accident. When we combine the details relayed from the region by Al Arabiya and other leaked data, the possibility that the incident was a precision sabotage carried out with coordinates provided from the inside grows considerably stronger. The fact that such high-level casualties were suffered at a strategic transit point like Zanjan shows that a massive black hole has opened in the Revolutionary Guards intelligence network. Those who lost their lives at the scene were the core cadre that formed the regime's nervous system, the brains running VIP protection and operational planning. It can be seen that the groups called the Immortal Guards, operating with a cell-type structure, are blasting the system from within, not just from street corners, but by infiltrating directly into operational areas. This situation shows that the regime's own security architecture has been penetrated, and even the most protected personnel have become open targets. It is precisely at this point that we need to read carefully how this panic and dissolution on the streets is reflecting as a fear of death, all the way to the very top of the regime hierarchy, directly into the corridors of religious leader Khamenei and his senior staff. There is a very critical detail pointed to by open-source analysts and intelligence reports leaking from the region. Precision assassinations like Zanjan and sabotages carried out with coordinates provided from inside have triggered an unprecedented security paranoia in the regime's top echelon. In an equation where even their own elite protection unit, Ansar al-Mahdi, can be wiped out within seconds, the religious leader and senior commanders have become afraid of their own shadows. Because it is unknown who is leaking information or which close bodyguard or aide is in secret contact with the Immortal Guards, the leadership cadre is reportedly withdrawing to deep bunkers and constantly changing their daily routines. The top administrators of a regime that has been exporting assassination and chaos across the Middle East for years are today trapped in their own capital, in their own palaces, with the fear of being assassinated. When the security apparatus's protective shield collapses from within, all that remains is absolute suspicion and the heavy psychological collapse that comes from feeling a death threat on the back of your neck at every moment. This psychological collapse has dragged the state's information management strategy into a full digital apartheid system. The regime is trying to establish through disproportionate pressure in the digital realm the control it has lost in the physical world. Through their white SIM card system, they grant internet access only to trusted elites, while imprisoning ordinary citizens in a communication darkness. This is not mere censorship. It is an attempt to isolate society from the outside world and shut it down. The tragic case reported by the New York Post shows the extent to which the regime's fear of information has reached. Civilians like Hessam al-Adin are being beaten to death simply for possessing a Starlink device in their homes and accessing the internet, a system that perceives a citizen as an existential threat simply because they can communicate with the outside world is actually confessing its own vulnerability. But this pressure is not breaking the resistance. Images leaking abroad through alternative satellite networks like Starlink are shattering the regime's information monopoly. So how are the immortal guards obtaining those highly classified military coordinates for precision assassinations like Zanjan? The answer to this question lies in the geo-economic collapse that feeds the security catastrophe on the ground. A state security apparatus stands not only on ideological slogans, but on the economic wheels that finance it. Today in Iran, those wheels are locked. Datasets analyzed by international economic publications clearly document the Iranian rial's freefall and the unstoppable inflation spiral. The financial strangulation strategy applied by the United States did not just strike the state's macroeconomy, it also seriously damaged the IRGC's massive holding structure and off-the-books cash flow. This macro bankruptcy picture has transformed into a direct survival struggle for lower-ranking soldiers and besieged militias on the ground. We are talking about lower-tier personnel whose salaries have turned to scraps of paper, who struggle to access basic necessities. A new equation has been established where military loyalty has fallen to the black market, where intelligence is sold to the highest bidder. Lower-tier personnel within the Revolutionary Guards themselves have begun leaking the routes and operation schedules of their own senior commanders, through bribery rings or simply to feed their families. Those who whispered the coordinates of those 14 elite soldiers in Zanjan were most likely their own comrades in arms who had economically abandoned the system. This implicit mutiny within the military hierarchy is silently spreading wherever money and security have run out. The shaking of a military or political structure begins not with a great explosion at the center, but with microscopic cracks in the capillaries merging to show signs of structural collapse. The specific vulnerabilities the Revolutionary Guards are experiencing on the streets are creating an irreversible ripple effect on Iran's domestic front. The loss of elite personnel in Zanjan and hit-and-run operations in city centers are causing a massive fault line fracture in the psychology of the regime's military personnel. Paramilitary forces and besieged militias, positioned until now to intimidate the public, are now being pushed into a psychology that makes them feel trapped at their own checkpoints. This situation brings a chain of reactions. Soldiers hesitating to go to their posts, night patrols faltering, and a marked decrease in military visibility on the ground. The breaching of the fear wall is changing the form of the actions. There are no longer just crowds chanting slogans in the squares. Now there are organized cells that analyze the regime's weak points, develop asymmetric attack methods, and strike directly at the system's nerve endings. The tactics employed by the Immortal Guards are causing the Revolutionary Guards to divert their attention from foreign policy and regional proxy wars, largely focusing on their own internal security crisis. The regime's reaction to this asymmetric threat appears to be nothing more than a spiral of violence that damages its own legitimacy. The authority trying to maintain control in the digital world is deploying disproportionate force to cut information flow, attempting to provide deterrence. The stories of civilians who suffered severe violence and lost their lives simply for possessing a Starlink device and accessing the internet show how deeply this panic has penetrated. The state is operating with a paranoia that views information as practically a weapon of mass destruction. It perceives a citizen as a massive threat simply because they can communicate with the outside world. Internet shutdowns have become a censorship mechanism that protects elites through white SIM card privileges, while imprisoning ordinary people in digital isolation. But alternative satellite internet solutions like Starlink are forming a resilient vein that pierces this digital blockade. The flow of data to media organizations and open-source analysts abroad is breaking the regime's information monopoly from within and laying the groundwork for the authority to enter freaks out mode. This disproportionate pressure and communication blackout paradoxically feeds the resistance even more. While the narrowing of communication channels physically isolates the public, the flames rising at night, the explosion sounds heard, and sabotage news spreading by word of mouth are giving new momentum to the protest potential in society. The regime's downplaying of these events in its own media is severely wounding trust in the state narrative, as it does not match the reality on the streets. People can easily read the vulnerability behind official statements. The fact that similar activities are occurring even in regions like Mashhad and Qom, historically considered the regime's ideological strongholds, sends serious signals that the loyalty crisis is spreading to the base. The cracks within the IRGC hierarchy, combined with this external pressure, are causing serious disruptions in the system's functioning. The scale intelligence leaks have reached is causing commanders to suspect the personnel beneath them. Unanswered questions about how coordinates were leaked are slowing decision-making mechanisms and creating a state of operational paralysis. The lack of trust is causing elite units to withdraw into themselves and shift to purely defensive positions, while bringing whispers of implicit mutiny among officers. This environment shows that the regime is being dragged into a position vulnerable to being crushed on the domestic front. While these internal vulnerabilities continue on the tactical field, looking through a wider lens, we can read how the regime has been drawn into a trap by its own moves on the geopolitical chessboard. The diplomacy vision applied by the US administration and President Trump is operating as an asymmetric attrition strategy that keeps the opponent in a constant cycle of uncertainty. The successive rejection of draft agreements offered by the Islamic Republic through Pakistan, containing concessions like opening the Strait of Hormuz but aiming to keep the nuclear program off the table, reveals the limits of Washington's stance. This uncompromising diplomatic pressure is creating a strangulation effect aimed at the regime's geo-economic jugular. CENTCOM's naval forces, maintaining their inspections in international waters, are ensuring commercial ships return to port and restricting the regime's freedom of movement at sea. The IRGC, whose revenue sources are shrinking, and which is struggling to finance the massive military apparatus inside, is producing doctrines that push the limits of desperation, rather than giving rational military responses to this strategic constriction. The leaked information that the Iranian Navy would train dolphins to plant sea mines on US warships shows not technical innovation, but how disconnected from reality the asymmetric warfare capacity has become. The idea of using marine mammals against advanced sonar systems and satellite-integrated naval task forces can be read not as a military strategy, but as a sign of desperation and the exhaustion of operational thinking. Such plans question credibility on the international stage, while laying bare how far the Army's real capabilities have declined. The regime's naval operations are effectively in halted status. This external infiltration and encirclement situation is triggering a serious internal reckoning in the regime's political kitchen. The disagreements between institutions controlled by IRGC hawks, like the Justice Ministry and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's team, are becoming pronounced. Reports that President Pezeshkian is being systematically removed from decision-making mechanisms reflect the IRGC's effort to take complete control in the political arena as well. But this situation, rather than resolving the crisis, results in responsibility and potential failure falling on a single address, directly on the guards. Looking at the bigger picture from a European perspective, the equation is becoming even harder for the regime. The decisions to withdraw US forces from bases in Germany and Europe, beginning to discuss its own defense integration, are not easing Iran's hand. On the contrary, serious terror warnings issued by the US Embassy in London are laying the groundwork for Europe to shift to a higher state of alertness against Iran-sourced asymmetric threats. The regime's potential external activities are causing European countries to shift to a harder diplomatic line as well, deepening Iran's global isolation. The vulnerabilities Hezbollah is experiencing in southern Lebanon and the responses from the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, are showing the limits of the proxy strategy Tehran has invested in for decades. Unable to provide sufficient logistical and strategic support to its proxy forces due to the internal crisis, the IRGC is experiencing a major loss of weight in the regional equation. When all these elements converge, the constriction at Hormuz, the ammunition depots targeted inside, the rejected diplomacy proposals, and the security forces being hunted on the streets, it shows the regime has lost its way in the labyrinth of its own construction. The massive apparatus once marketed as the Middle East's invincible force, today appears to have transformed into a tired, reactionary structure, fighting for survival on its own streets. The ammunition depots blown up in Zanjan, the checkpoints dispersed in Yazd, and the rejection letters received one after another at the diplomatic table present the photograph of a systematic erosion. While the Revolutionary Guard's undisputed authority on the streets is gone, the fear narrative that kept the regime standing is weakening before the eyes of its own citizens. Washington's ruthless economic vice and the asymmetric internal pressure created by the immortal guards are pushing the system into a helpless isolation. Now there is a navy seeking salvation from dolphins and a paranoia that destroys its own citizens over a satellite device. What is happening is not an ordinary crisis. It is being recorded as a shocking preview of an era's regional game maker, gradually fading into history on its own domestic front. So do you think this regime, which has allowed even its soldiers' loyalty to fall to the black market, can stay standing against internal and external blockades? Could the next target the immortal gods reach through these deep leaks be directly the heart of Tehran? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.